See more life.
Well, the campaigning in Iowa is almost over.
The presidential nominating process begins tonight. The director of the Marquette Law School Poll, Charles Franklin, is back with us. Good to see you, Charles.
Good to be here.
So let's talk about expectations for the Republicans and the Democrats.
Sure.
For the Republicans, the conventional wisdom is probably Trump, Cruz, Rubio. But Iowa is always a surprise.
It's always a surprise, and that's the nice thing is we can quit worrying about the polls and we can see what voters actually choose to do. Right now, in those last polling averages, Trump is at 29, Cruz at 24, and Rubio at 17. So a thing to watch tonight is which, if any of them, do better than those numbers, which would suggest more people turned out for them, more enthusiasm, which one falls short. And if all of them do better, it's showing us that the also-rans way back in the pack gave up on their guys and started to vote for the top tier of candidates. So there's a lot to watch for tonight.
And same on the Democratic side.
On the Democratic side, Clinton's a bit ahead. She's a little bit more ahead in some polls than others. About a 4-point lead, though, in the latest poll from the Des Moines Register, which is the gold standard there, about a 3-point lead. And again, the same thing, except there with just two candidates plus O'Malley at 1 or 2%. Whatever one does better than, the other almost necessarily has to do worse than. And so we'll see.
And big turnout is going to help Sanders, Trump.
What all the analysts are saying is both Sanders and Trump have a lot of supporters who haven't participated in the process before. So if you succeed in bringing in new voters, you do great. But getting new voters to actually show up on a cold and possibly snowy night is hard. So again, we get into this interminable debate until after the votes are counted tonight about which side is better able to turn out its people.
Well, what do you think is the importance of these caucuses? Because I mentioned Iowa's always a surprise. No one saw Rick Santorum coming last time.
That's right.
Or Huckabee the time before that.
Exactly. And so, first of all, don't ever forget that Iowa can surprise. So maybe we'll see somebody else in the top 3 or somebody in the top 1 that we didn't expect. So that's one possibility. The other is it sets the stage for moving forward. It is that moment when voters have had their say. And even though Iowa's a small state and it's not representative of the country, it's a place that's been looking at these candidates for over a year, often up close and personal. And so in that, I think it really does carry some weight far beyond its numbers or far beyond its representativeness of the American people.
And it gets a ton of media attention. There are hundreds of media from around the world covering the caucuses tonight.
Our Jessica Arp asked John Dickerson, the host of CBS's Face the Nation, what he will be watching for tonight.
So even before the results come in, we're going to start looking for turnout. Who's getting them the biggest numbers, the Democrats, the Republicans. If there's big turnout on the Democratic side, it probably means that Bernie Sanders has done what he hoped to do, which is take those first-time caucus goers, those younger voters, and get them to actually participate in the caucus. On the Republican side, if they turn out, it means Donald Trump has taken all these new people and brought them into the process. Now, once they start counting the votes, we'll start to look. We'll have some entrance polls where we'll be able to talk to people before they go in, and we'll see what the shape of the electorate looks like. There's going to be a big evangelical vote, as there always is in Iowa. Which way are they going? Are they going all for Cruz, the way they did for Huckabee and Santorum? Mitt Romney in those two races in 2012 and in 2008 only got in the teens among evangelical voters, and he lost both times. So where's Donald Trump going to show up with those voters? Is he going to get out of the teens and into the 20s? That'll give us some indication of how he might do at the end of the night.
What about the state of Iowa? I mean, 2012, we saw Rick Santorum. In 2008, we saw Mike Huckabee. They haven't picked a nominee in a while. What if they do or they don't here?
I think that Iowa Republicans are nervous about the fact that in the last two contests, the state picked people who didn't go on. Iowans always say that they just winnow the field. They don't pick the winner still. And there are a lot of Republicans who are nervous if Ted Cruz wins because they don't think Ted Cruz is going to become the nominee. Therefore, they will have nominated Cruz, Huckabee, Santorum, all of whom don't become the nominee. They worry that their status in the process will be diminished and that people will just think of Iowa as being just kind of a straw poll among very conservative voters, and it'll lack that kind of national message. I think on the Democratic side, Iowa's in fine shape. It's where Barack Obama launched his campaign. It's a place where there's spirited contests, And so I think in the Democratic story, Iowa will continue to have the kind of glory that it did, starting even when it launched McGovern in '72 and then Carter in '76.
Interesting. All right, what happens after Iowa? We'll talk with Charles Franklin about that when Live at 4 continues. We're talking Iowa Caucus with Charles Franklin, so let's go beyond Iowa. All these other run candidates, are they going to fall off the scene here?
They'll start dropping off pretty quickly. Some will drop off immediately after a bad performance tonight. Some will go ahead and hold on into New Hampshire, which is in a week, Tuesday next week. Some of them are doing better in New Hampshire polling than they are in Iowa polling. That's true of Kucinich. It's true of Chris Christie. And so they have a real reason to go on to New Hampshire. But if you've gotten 2% or 1% in Iowa, odds are you're not going to do that great in New Hampshire. And if you then don't do well in New Hampshire, that's when we'll really see people drop out.
If Donald Trump wins tonight, what will that mean? Will that be evidence that Iowans, there was no pushback for him skipping the debate? And
it will validate his support, and he goes into New Hampshire currently with quite a lead in the New Hampshire polling. So there's a real question of whether he really does start to win and win and win again. He was quoted as saying that he was going to run the table. Well, a win tonight would start that process. But the upshot here is the party is going to ultimately choose the nominee on both sides that voters are ready to go to the polls and vote for. The old days when the party overlords could dictate who would be the nominee are long past. So we really are in a process now of seeing what the voters who show up at the polls, because they're the only ones that get counted, what are they going to choose for their party? And how does that work out on the Democratic side? How does it work out on the Republican side?
So now the election begins.
It absolutely does.
After the last year and a half?
And we can be here till June as it continues, if all works out well.
We will see you tomorrow with a postmortem on Iowa.
Indeed.
All right, have a good evening,
we'll
Charles.
see you tomorrow. Thanks Charles.